Welcome to the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast from Nashville, Tennessee. I am your host, John Martin Keith. Celebrities, working class musicians, and people who work behind the scenes in all areas of the music industry will share their stories, encourage you, and give practical advice of ways you can make a living doing what you love in the music industry. This episode is brought to you by Edenbrook Productions. Edenbrook Productions is the company I founded to help musicians grow in their craft. Are you a songwriter, but maybe you've been told your songs aren't quite there yet? Or are your songs ready, but you don't feel stage ready? Or maybe music is your passion, but you feel imprisoned by your day job and you don't know what to do next to make your dream a reality? Well, Edenbrook Productions is here to help. We offer consulting services via phone call, Skype, and FaceTime. And for the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast listeners, we're offering an introductory 1-hour consultation special. Click on the link in the show notes to contact me, and let's get you making a living in the music industry. Hey friends, welcome to the show today. I am really excited to introduce you to my old friend, Eric Horner. I've known Eric since around 1987 or so. We are both from the small town of Paducah, Kentucky, just a couple of hours up the road from Nashville here. Eric and I both grew up taking guitar lessons at Chapman Music in Paducah. When my guitar teacher, Herb Chapman, was out of the store, Eric would fill in and teach me whatever song I had on my mind that day. Once Eric made it to Nashville, the doors started opening quickly, and he found work playing guitar and singing background for country music superstar Lee Greenwood, who you probably know by the song God Bless the USA. Over the next 17 years, Eric has also worked with superstars Shania Twain, Wynonna Judd, and Paisley. In 2002, Eric shifted his focus to gospel music and now spends over 200 days a year on the road ministering in churches and military bases all across America. I hope you enjoy our conversation today. Well, welcome, Mr. Eric Horner. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for letting me come over to your studio. This is beautiful. I love it.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
My doghouse is what my wife calls this.
Calls it the doghouse. Well, it's the nicest doghouse I've ever seen, personally.
Thank you.
Very cool. So you and I have known each other for years, actually. We rarely get to see each other in person.
I know. We go way back.
We go way back to our hometown of Paducah, Kentucky, where we grew up together. And you're a few years ahead of me, but just to kind of give our listeners a background on how we know each other. Okay. So I grew up taking guitar lessons at Chapman Music, Herb Chapman, in Paducah, and you did as well.
I did. I actually took guitar from Steve.
Okay.
From Stephen Curtis. I was his very first guitar student.
Oh, yeah?
He was a freshman in high school, and I was a sixth grader.
Okay.
And so that's how I got introduced to the whole Chapman family.
Yeah. Well, I was 4 years old.
Yep.
So I'm the youngest student that Herb ever had. And still to this day, nobody has beat that record yet. So
I remember the little red-headed dude coming into the store. I remember that.
That was me. And so you actually would teach me. You would sub in for Herb when he couldn't teach sometimes. And so you taught me 2 or 3 times. And I remember the one song that I remember you teaching me was Fallen Angel by Poison.
Oh, my gosh.
I think I was...
Wow.
I was in like 9th grade or something like that.
Yeah.
And you taught me that song. I remember that. But I always thought that was so cool that you were teaching guitar and then would help and fill in and teach me from time to time. And then the next thing I knew, you were out playing for Lee Greenwood in country music and touring all over the place. And, so lots happened for you over the years. So just...
Yeah. It's been a long road and a lot of pieces to the puzzle.
Yeah. So just a quick background, tell us about your time in Paducah and taking lessons and kind of getting into music that led you to the point of being able to do it full time.
Sure. I grew up, I had 3 cousins that played the guitar. And so at every family gathering, at Christmas especially, everybody break out the guitars. And I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And so when I was 6 years old, when that would happen, I would break out a tennis racket and strum along with them. I wanted to be just like them.
Yeah.
And one cousin in particular, his name was Mark Dicus. He was my hero. He even played the bass guitar, and I thought that was just awesome.
Coolest,
He played in the swing choir and all of that, and they would come over and sing for us kids in elementary school. And I was telling everybody, that's my cousin. I'm gonna be just like him.
Yeah.
And I still remind him to this day, hey, you're still my hero.
Yeah.
They're the ones that gave me the music bug.
Sure.
And I began beating on. Look, my dad got a little electric guitar from, I think, Super X Drugs there in Paducah.
Yeah.
When they were still there, and they called it, the brand was Prestige.
Yep.
And I got a little amplifier, and buddy, I was the king of rock and roller. I thought I was.
Right.
And I got my first really good guitar in the 6th grade, which was a Yamaha FG 160. I thought, boy, I had arrived, and got that from Mr. Chapman, and began to take lessons from Steve. And one big blessing that I always had that really fed the music bug were teachers. I went to Lone Oak High School there in Paducah, or in elementary school, middle school. All my music teachers were very good to let me do what I did, play guitar. In the choirs, and I was always one of the accompanists. And had it not been for that, I probably never would have pursued music full time, especially in high school. My high school director, we had a swing choir, is what we called it back then. It was like a show choir. And, we had a full band set up with it. And just getting in and playing all those hits that you heard on the radio with the swing choir and learning how to do that really gave me the bug, and the fact that they allowed me to just do it. I really attribute a lot of my career in music to them just giving me those opportunities.
Sure. So after you were teaching at Chapman Music for, how long did you teach there?
God, seems like forever. I started teaching there in high school. I actually, on my senior year, that we had a program called DE, Distributive Education, and you could go to school for half a day and then go to work. And that's what I did. I just walk up and work for Mr. Chapman and run the store so he could go fishing, and eventually I guess I moved forward enough on the guitar where they felt like they could give me some students, and so I started to teach and did the same Chapman method, exactly how I'd been taught, and that has been a successful method.
It has been. That's what I teach all of my students now.
Yeah, a lot of kids that went on to become pros, have gone through that, and it's just all, what's so great about it, it's all ear training. I remember when we went to college. I went to Anderson, was now university, but Anderson College in Indiana, and I was there with Stephen Curtis and Herbie Chapman, and our theory teacher just couldn't stand us because she couldn't stump us. In the oral comp class where they'd, pick out intervals and you had to tell them what they were doing, and she'd go, well, let's hear one of our real musicians do this, and we'd do it, and it just make her so mad she couldn't stand it. But that was all that good ear training we got in the Chapman method.
That's awesome. So graduating high school, jumping on into college, you're at Anderson with Steve and Herbie, doing all those things. And then, now you guys did you guys do music together in college? I know
We
you had
did.
Chapman Henderson.
Yes. Yeah, we had a band called, and I was in it for a short time.
Okay.
Steve started making plans to come to Belmont, and for other reasons, I needed to come home and be at home with my family for a little bit. So I never even finished the first year there at Anderson College. My intentions were to come down to Nashville and go to Belmont as well.
Okay.
And I never did. I became a Rhodes Scholar, or ROAD, and got out. Stephen actually opened the first doors for me for my first job in country music. A group called, back then they were called Bell. They became known as the Girls Next Door. They were on MTM Records, which was the Mary Tyler Moore group. They had a label here, and it was them and Holly Dunn and a lady by the name of Judy Rodman. They had several artists that had a few hit records, and Steve worked with all those girls at Opryland,
Right.
And so they were needing a bass player, and so Steve called me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in the gig?" And so he got me an audition, and they hired me, and that started a whole 17-year chain of running around the world with these country singers, and I had a good long run of it here.
Yeah. So just having a relationship, knowing Steve from childhood, going to college,
The whole key to this business is relationships.
Yep. I know I say it all the time, and people are probably sick of hearing me say it, but I say it in every interview.
Yeah.
And just out talking to people. But the whole thing, it really is truly built on relationships and who you know.
It is.
More so than talent. And you can be, you have to have talent, obviously. You have to have some level of talent, but the determination to do it, and knowing people and having the ability to get along with people.
Yeah, you know, and that's easier said than done with musicians because they're some of the most temperamental people in the world. But you know, people ask me often, well, what do I have to do to become a successful artist, songwriter, musician? Come here. You got to come here and become a part of the grapevine. You got to make friends. You got to make relationships because very seldom. I've only seen it just a handful of times in my whole time here. Do artists have what you call an open cattle call audition for anybody? That just doesn't happen. Right. Somebody knows somebody. They get the private audition, and it's just because you've had a relationship. You know, that's how I got hired with Lee Greenwood. Was the group that I played with, the Girls Next Door, were his opening act for a couple of years. You know, they had just enough hit record success to where they could pick up a tour, and Lee was pretty hot back then and toured a lot. And so when I heard through the grapevine, through relationships, that an opening was becoming available in his band, I was able to go and find him. I found him at the Opryland Hotel. He was doing a private show there, and I'd made friends with some of his crew, his road manager at the time, and I told them what I was there for. And they said, yeah, man, come on, you know, and they took me straight to Lee, and I said, I want the job. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, call my office in the morning, and you come out to the house, and we'll audition you.
Okay.
And it was kind of, Lee was funny back in that day. He, of course, was playing country music, but he wanted a band that looked kind of like Whitesnake. Right. You know, we all had to have all the long hair and the rock and roll boots and all that stuff. But one of his songs, there was one song in particular, acoustic guitar has always been my specialty above all the instruments that I play. And there was one song called If There's Any Justice that he did. And it sounded a lot more difficult than it really was to play, but a lot of guys stumbled. And that was the reason there was becoming an opening in his band. The guy they had there just couldn't play it. And so I called the next morning, and they sent me to his house, and he had people again, he was a real busy, in the moment guy. There ain't a lot going on with his career. And so I just sat down at his piano waiting on him, and I started to play If There's Any Justice. And he walked over to me and said, you're hired. The gig pays this. Go to my office and fill out the paperwork. It was that fast. But again, just because of relationships. I heard about it, was able to get to the artist and get the job.
So, and this is back in the day before there was no internet, no social media, any of those types of things. You had, but you've been on the road. You had been on the road with him just because you're playing for the opening act.
Right.
So you guys had a relationship a little bit already from that.
Yeah. He, you know, if they just recognize you, hey, I know that guy. You know, that's kind of what it was with him. Yeah. I knew I'd made friends with some of his crew and band, but he recognized me from being out on that tour, so it wasn't like a total stranger coming up.
So how did you know that he was going to be at Opryland to go hunt him down there to tell him that?
Again, I had a friend who played in the band, and he told me, he said, well, we're doing this private gig over at the Opryland Hotel. You might want to show up.
Gotcha.
Again, relationships.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I think it's good to know for the audience listening, people that want to get into playing for another artist. You know, it's like, how do I find these things out? And just the determination, you know, to somebody knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, you know, and if you can touch base with that person and somehow work your way, just find out details, you know, it's kind of like being a PI. Yeah. You know, being a private investigator and having to go hunt down who it is or what it is you're looking for sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Back in that day, you would hear certain things if you, and again, this has all changed a lot, but a lot of us used to hang out at the Musicians Union Hall.
Down on Music Row.
Yeah, you'd hear stuff occasionally there. Going out and just sitting in with bands around towns where you'd really hear it. Sometimes doing writers' nights, you'd hear, well, so-and-so's looking for a guitar player, or you know, you just really got to come immerse yourself in all that is the music business. Right. And even if you're coming here to just do one thing, if you're coming to be a side man, if you're coming to be a writer, you just need to come just kind of immerse yourself in it. Go to writers' nights. Go, you know, anything that you can where they put you in front of people.
Yeah. And that goes for any major city that has music. So Nashville, LA, Chicago, Austin, New York, all those places, wherever somebody might be living. And even in, you know, like in Paducah, you know, we're in this small little town in Kentucky where we're from, but finding opportunities even there.
Sure.
And it's a lot different now in Paducah than it was back then.
Yeah.
We have the Carson Center now, which is a huge, beautiful music venue. A lot of artists come into that. So even if you're in whatever town you're in, if there is some sort of a music venue where artists or bands are coming in to do concerts, is find ways to get in and work those shows. The production companies or the venue itself or something that you can be around it.
Yeah.
And get to know people.
Exactly.
And that's how opportunities open up. So how long were you out playing for Lee? Now, just so people know who Lee Greenwood is, he's the guy who sings "God Bless the USA."
Yes.
So the huge
and
Independence
people
Day
forget
anthem.
because that song, and it used to drive him crazy. That song just really overshadowed his whole career because leading up to that, he had. I was trying to remember what year certain things happened, but he had like 10 number ones, I think. He won a Grammy for a song called "IOU" that was one of the biggest wedding songs. But then you get a song like "God Bless the USA." That's your career song.
Yeah.
And I remember I worked for him twice, 2 different 5-year stints. The second stint was only supposed to be a few months, but I stayed 5 years.
Okay.
But I had gone back to work for him in late 2000, going into 2001. He had a theater in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And I wasn't, no way I was going to go sit down in a theater for that long. But he called and he said, if you'll put me together a band, we'll go and we'll do maybe 15 to 20 road dates a year. That's it. Because at that time, I'd settled into being a session player on acoustic guitar, so I couldn't really be out on the road. And I thought, well, I could do 15 or 20 dates a year. That's no big deal. Because he had to stay at his show at his theater. And so we did that, and then all of a sudden 9/11 happened. And, oh my gosh, our schedule went black. Every entertainer in the country was getting canceled.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody wanted Lee. And it was really wild. Some of the crowds we went into were obviously not our genre.
Right.
But they wanted the comfort that came from the song "God Bless the USA," and they had no clue about songs like "It Turns Me Inside Out," "I Don't Mind the Thorns If You're the Rose." I mean, all these big songs, "IOU." Nobody ever, paid any attention to those. They wanted to hear "God Bless the USA." So.
Yeah. That's such a powerful song too.
It is.
Just for what it is, and always for, the 4th of July and those types of things, but especially in the midst of a crisis that we were facing as a country, just to be that comfort,
that song did an unprecedented thing. Nobody else has done this. The original recording, I think it came out on Mr. Greenwood's Greatest Hits album, hanging on the wall there. That was 1984, and it was Song of the Year for the CMA.
Okay.
In 1984. The original recording has been number 1 on Billboard 3 times.
Wow.
When it first, I was working in Paducah as a DJ at WKYQ when they came out the first time, and I'll never forget the weekend that it came out. I mean, the phone lines would not stop.
Yeah.
And then again in the Gulf War, and then again when we went to Afghanistan, it was a hit 3 times. Nobody's ever done that before. Same original recording.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, let's back up for a second, because you're talking about being a DJ at the radio station in Paducah. How did you land that gig?
They had they used to do this thing called the Wrangler Showdown. It was a talent contest kind of deal, and I entered in it. I think I was 16, 17, and I entered in it just as a contestant. And while I was there, talking to the radio folks, I learned that they were looking for a part-time guy work weekends, and so I applied, and they hired me.
Okay.
And so I worked there. I worked for WKYQ. I worked overnights on their adult contemporary station called WKYX at the time. I think it's all talk radio now, but I had another family member, a first cousin that worked there, so we had a large time doing overnights there, and those were good memories. Made a lot of good friends there.
So, just out of curiosity, so they hired you. You filled out an application, and I mean, did you have any experience as a DJ or being in front of a microphone? Really, other than performing, maybe, I guess.
Yeah, just singing gospel in a gospel group that I grew up in and stuff. But that was, I didn't have any, like being a spokesperson.
Yeah. So just kind of taking a chance on you.
Because
I mean, being a DJ is part of the music business.
Yeah, it is.
And so for maybe there's somebody listening that wants to be a DJ, and how do you you start small. Obviously, you're not going to become Bobby Bones,
Right.
on
And they
in
told me.
Nashville or something like that from the
Yeah.
beginning. But you start small. You have to start in a local market. If you can get your foot in the door, and you work your way up. But go
Yeah.
ahead. They were going to tell you what.
They told me when I hired on, don't try to do any personality stuff. Just read the weather. Just do what you got to do.
Yeah.
And I listened to some of those. Of course, I didn't listen to them. I tried to be funny. And I listened to some of those first air checks I did, and I was so embarrassed. I thought I should have listened and just done the weather. But those were good days. There was a good crew there. So some of those guys are still there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Some of those guys are still there and still dear friends of mine.
Yep. That's awesome. Okay, so now we're going to fast forward back to you've been out playing with Lee Greenwood, and then you've also played with some other pretty big name acts. Who else have you played with?
I've played in Brad Paisley's first band.
Okay, when he first came out?
Yeah, that was. I've known Brad since he was 12.
Really?
He was the house guitar player it's kind of like a smaller version of the Grand Ole Opry over in Wheeling, West Virginia, the WWVA Jamboree.
Because that's where he's from.
Yeah. And since he was a little fella, he was the staff guitar player there. And we would play there once or even twice a year, depending on if I came in with two different acts. And so we just got to be buddies, and he'd come out to the bus and we'd break out the guitars. And I always thought he was a little Steve Wariner protege because he'd learn every lick that Steve did, And he called me out of the blue one day and said, I'm ashamed of myself to be just now calling you. He said, I've been in Nashville for a while. And he said, I've been going to Belmont College. And he said, I've got this little record deal on Arista Records, and they're going to introduce me at Fanfare, which is now the CMA Fest. Right. He said, would you come play in my band?
Nice.
And so I said, you better believe it, buddy. And we showed up at the first rehearsal, and he had a picture of he and I. Like I told you, Mr. Greenwood wanted us to look like Whitesnake.
Right.
I had a trench coat, concho belts, and more hair than you could put in a bushel basket, standing next to this little short Brad Paisley, and he was 12 years old in that photo. But then he broke out the guitar, and I was like, holy cow, where'd you learn to do that?
Right.
He's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
What an amazing player, and just a great guy. Really is a great guy.
So that's awesome. Oh, go ahead. You're going to say something.
No, you were just asking who else I did.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
So with Brad, obviously one of the very best guitar players that's ever existed, in my opinion.
He's amazing.
I mean, he's one of the best ever. As a guitar player, I just look at him and watch him, and I'm like, I need to go take some more lessons or do something because I can't even my eyes can't keep up with what he's doing. He's so fast at what he does. But again, it's like, how do you get to play for Brad Paisley? Well, you knew him for years and years, and that's cool and he knew who you were and what you were capable of doing. And so time comes, he calls you up, and that doesn't happen to everybody. That's kind of a, what's the word?
Right place at the right time.
You're in the right place at the right time. And then you've also played with Shania.
I just sang
Twain?
with Shania.
You sang with Shania.
She didn't even know I played.
Okay.
And all we did was television. They did not tour with her until I think she had 10 number ones or something. They wanted to be able to start out headlining in arenas. They didn't want her to be the opening act for anybody.
Right.
And again, relationships. The guy that was playing drums with her had been my drummer when I was out pursuing a solo career in country music.
Okay.
And so a lot of Shania's records that Mutt Lange produced on her, a lot of those sound effects are vocal, that sound percussive and whatnot. Yeah. So they wanted 8 people on stage singing. And sometimes you're playing the drums with your voice, kind of, or just percussive things. But when they started looking for singers, again, it was to do Fanfare. And he gave him my name, and the drummer.
Oh, that's right, the drummer that you knew.
Yeah, he gave him my name, and they called, and so I did a few things with them.
Okay. Did you have to audition for her?
No. I just went to rehearsal and we did it.
They just knew.
That's something else that's real important is to be able to recognize people's abilities, and because if you recommend somebody, your neck's out there on the line.
That's right.
And I have had very few people that I could take it to the bank if they said, because I've been the band leader in a lot of situations. I was a band leader for Mr. Greenwood for a while. And I too did not want to do the open cattle call auditions because you just get covered up with everybody that thinks they can play.
Right.
And to have somebody, it's really valuable to have somebody that if they tell you the guy can cut it, they can cut it.
Right.
I hired a young man from Paducah to play keyboards for Mr. Greenwood, named Doug Carter.
Yeah, I remember. He. Wow. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was still in the band at the time, and was the band leader at the time, and I'd already been told by one of two guys. I've only had two guys that if they told me they could do it, I didn't have to listen to them. I knew they could do it. Mm-hmm. And I'd been told by one of my friends that I trusted really like that, and that, oh no, Doug could handle it.
Oh yeah.
And so we were going to do an audition, and it seems like we set up in the back of Studio 20 when it was still there down on Music Row, and he brought in all this gear, and I don't think I even had him play for me. I just sat and talked to him. I wanted to see where his head was, you know, and just seemed like a great guy, and so we hired him, and he's still he is now the musical director for Mr. Greenwood. And,
is he really?
Yeah. He's been with Lee a long time.
Okay, so this is a really, really odd conversation. I was not expecting this. I haven't heard that name in years, but Doug Carter actually played on one of my songs when I was 16 or 17 or something like that.
Yeah.
I made a little cassette tape of single of a song, and he was helping out. He was in the choir or something that we were doing at school, and he ended up playing on one of my songs. And
Doug's a great talent.
And he was great, and I haven't thought about him in years, and so that's really interesting to know that.
That's cool. It's a lot of times and I know me as an artist, I get married to how somebody plays. Mm-hmm. And Doug was following in the shoes of a guy by the name of Gordon Mote, who is one of the best in the world.
Fantastic.
And of course, Lee's like me, he gets really married to and he was really married to how Gordon plays, but he absolutely loves how Doug plays, and really hung in there. And Doug's just, he can play pretty much anything. He's really great.
That's awesome. Wow. That's a flashback that I was not expecting today. That's super cool.
World gets smaller.
You have to tell him I said hello.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, so let's talk a minute about your artist career.
Okay.
So between touring and playing for other artists, so you did like a 5-year stint with Lee Greenwood, and then there was a break, and then you went back again 5 years, another 5 years. Mm-hmm. So in between that time, is that when you were doing your artist?
Yeah, I had decided to try to pursue being an artist. I'd written a couple of songs that actually Mr. Greenwood had wanted to record, and so he signed me to his publishing company. And for a while there, they were pitching me as an artist, and I got out, beating the road with my band, doing all the nightclubs and the casinos and everything that you had to do that. And it just, we got close on a couple of occasions to a couple of things, but never really landed anything significant as far as a deal goes. And
for a record deal.
Yeah. And so it just, the music industry is constantly changing. And where I was, it left me sitting where I was and went on to the next thing, And so I started getting into the studios and doing some production work. I had a production company back then called Making Tracks Productions, and we worked around the clock. There were 3 or 4 years there where we just worked all the time. And, Nashville has an underbelly of people that just rip people off royally. They see newbies coming to town. Oh yeah, I can promise them the world, and then charge them just humongous dollars for their projects, knowing full well that they can't do anything for them. Mm-hmm. And so we made a good living, not by charging a lot. We were very, very inexpensive, but by volume. And we would just literally work. We did a lot of all-night sessions, but just to get people things that they could afford. And a lot of our clientele were people that had already been through the snakes, and all that. And so after doing that enough and working with enough session players, again, making those relationships, we tried to use guys that were playing on records on our stuff so that our stuff would be not demo level, but master level sounding stuff. And so, again, you make those relationships and your friends, and all of a sudden you're getting a call for, hey, come play on this record or that record or, this demo or that demo. And so the more, again, you make friends in that pool of players, and suddenly you get pulled into that. If you go in and you can cut it, doesn't always work out that way. I've been real blessed to always be able to grow into situations, especially as being a session player. My first really good writing deal were the people that owned Studio 19 down in the Music Row area. It is now a parking lot. They've moved. They moved out of the row. They're out in Franklin now at the Sound Kitchen.
Oh yeah.
But the guy that owned that was back in the day. He produced some big records. His name's Larry Rogers, and he produced Louisiana Saturday Night, the Mel McDaniel hit. Yeah. Charlie McLean, Who's Cheating Who, and he'd had a lot of big hit records, and I was so blessed that he took me under his wing. But one of the things he did by taking me under his wing was he said, go into the studio and learn. All those tools were at my disposal. I had to kind of work around the paying clients, and sometimes I had to work overnight. But when do you ever get access to a studio, a big full-time big studio like that, to just learn?
Right.
That was really brave on his part.
Sure.
But he was such a great source of advice in teaching me how to make a record, what to do, what not to do. And he gave me the most important advice I've ever gotten, and I've passed this along many times. He said, whatever you do, get up out of bed every day and do something for your career. He said, I don't care if it's booking a date, if it's writing a song, if it's getting in the studio, whatever. He said, you do something every day for your career. And I've tried to live by that. Even now, even with our ministry, I'm doing something every day for that. And I think that's a big key to how we've survived all these years. We've been in full-time ministry now for almost 18 years.
Yeah. And
it's just from being determined and getting up every day and doing something for it.
Yeah. Nobody else is going to do it for you.
No. No.
Especially when you're an independent artist.
Yep. You got to create your own niche. You got to find something not everybody else is doing.
Right. So becoming a session player, I'm assuming that's a relationship issue as well. That's how you kind of got into what drew you to becoming a session player after being out on the road? Like, why did you make that change?
It's, I was just ready to get off the road. Okay. The road will burn you out big time. And there's a stigma that road players can't be session players.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And it's, there are a few who can, but it's just a matter of conditioning and thinking differently. On the road, you can get away with a lot. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you're trying to take a 5-piece band, make it sound like an 8-piece band, and you're covering a lot of bases to, mm-hmm. You can't do that in studio. You've got to stay out of the way. The most important thing in studio is the 2 T's, time and taste. You've got to know when to play and when not to play. And on the road, you're just noodling and filling and trying to fill up the band, but that's not your job in the studio. It's to make it clean as a whistle and be tasteful in and when you do play, it needs to mean something. It needs to say something, and then sit back down.
Yeah, that's really good advice. How long did you do session work before you went back out on the road again?
About 5 years. Okay. There was the 5 years with Mr. Greenwood, and then even those years when I was chasing the country record deal, I still made my living by doing sessions as well. I mean, we wore a lot of hats back then, but you have to.
And you still do.
Yeah.
I mean, even more so nowadays.
Yeah. There were a few really good jobs back in that day. Like Mr. Greenwood was one of them mm-hmm. that were known for paying people very well. Mm-hmm. The cool thing about Lee was he was a musician. He's a very good musician. And so he understood, you've got to surround yourself with a great band and you got to take care of those people. Mm-hmm. But those jobs are few and far between, the really big gigs. And you talk about hard to get. Some of the big session players are out doing the really big gigs now. Mm-hmm. I've got a friend, Mike Johnson, plays steel guitar, plays on all of my stuff. He was this year's Academy of Country Music Steel Player of the Year. Okay. And he's out doing dates on the road with Reba as well. Okay. And technology's kind of made that possible. It used to be you could not be on the road. If you're a session player, you don't want anybody to know you're on the road. Oh, then you get that road player stigma, mm-hmm. or you're not available. Right. They call you're out on the road. Well, they don't call you again. They call somebody else that is available. Yeah. But anymore, with the little 2-channel Pro Tools rigs and whatever and laptops, you can still get in your room at night after the gig and fly in parts all over the world. Who wants what, and so that I know that he does that. He does a lot of session work on the road. Yeah, and I do have to do that a lot as well. Yeah. I'm out playing my own shows, and then I'll be tracking something for someone else, in my spare time or whatever. And that's what we have to do. There's no one thing that anybody can really do anymore. Very, very few of us anyway, unless maybe you're Brad Paisley. Yeah. But even then, he's artist, he's a songwriter, he produces. I mean, he's got a whole
entourage of people he has to take care of. So like that's sort of a whole different thing,
And
but it's still multiple.
a small handful of guys. Like I have a friend who I moved this guy to town to play for me from Branson, Missouri. His name's John Conley. And when I got him and I heard him play the first time, I thought, oh my gosh, I won't keep him long. And I didn't. I mean, within 6 months, he was out with Wynonna.
Oh, okay.
And playing with her. But he now plays for Kenny Chesney, and Kenny's one of a handful of artists that really takes care of their people. If they decide not to tour for a year, it's not everybody you're on your own. You still get paid. You know, there's a program in place there to keep people's livelihoods going.
Oh,
and
that's
nice. Admirable. That is so admirable because, you know, any of those artists could do it.
Sure.
But how many will? You know,
Right.
And there's a small handful that will.
That's cool. That's nice to know that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your Making Tracks production company.
Mm-hmm.
What was involved in getting that off the ground and letting people know that this was something that you were doing? Because this is a whole nother avenue of income for you in music, is producing for other people and making demos or whatever it is. So what was involved with making that happen?
I got a lot of business from the NSAI, the National Songwriters Association. Again, people were, so wary in that group of the snakes. You know, the people that wanted just to gouge you for doing a demo, and then your demo just doesn't sound that great. You know, there were so many of those guys that when you, again, develop those relationships with people, maybe you go out. I used to go out to writers' nights and listen to writers, and I'd give them a card, hey, if we can help you, you know, and again, just becoming part of that grapevine and meeting folks. Groups like NSAI, they have a rule in place that they don't advertise for you. They're not going to send somebody to you for the protection of their writers. But you gain a reputation pretty quickly if you do give people a good product. And we were doing it, back in those days, we were doing full-blown, I think, 6-piece demos for like $350. And the same thing would cost you about $12 today.
Right.
But we worked around the clock, and you know, because we still had to pay for studio time, even though I was involved with the studio, I wasn't the owner.
Right.
So
you didn't own your own studio back then.
No, no, I didn't. I was at Studio 19 and 20, and so we still had to pay something for the studio. We got a break on it because I was the staff writer there, but we still had to pay. And so in order to pay everybody else, I mean, we had to do we do 5 and 6 songs in a 3-hour session. Mm-hmm. And that's hard to do. That's hard to do, and make them really mean something. I mean, you're usually in good shape as long as the guys are awake. But if you start doing those overnight sessions, you know, and everybody starts getting weary and bleary-eyed, it's hard to keep your creative thinking cap on and really give people some good bang for their buck. But that's what we did. I mean, we built a huge business there for a while. It working every day.
And this is because you learned in your off time. Learn how to work the console and the board and
how to make records.
How to make a record because of this other producer that let you go into his studio off the clock and learn how to do it.
What I got.
Yeah.
Of course, that was back in the days pre-Pro Tools and all that.
Yeah.
But that was you just couldn't get that kind of education by going and taking a class at Belmont. I mean, that was hands-on. And one of the coolest things about it is I was also a writer, and through the doors of Studio 19 came some of the biggest writers in the world, guys like Craig Wiseman, Annie Roboff, just people that were just knocking the charts, you know, topping the charts all the time. And you're getting to kind of sometimes get to play on their sessions, but other times just get to sit back and observe and be around some of the best players in town. There's not a better school than that.
Yeah,
for creativity.
Sure. Yeah. So nowadays you're doing music ministry. Mm-hmm. So you play mostly a lot of churches.
I do.
In those types of events, and then also you work with the military.
Yes.
Doing a lot with those guys. So tell me, first of all, let's talk about just the ministry aspect of what with what you do. Was that transition from doing country music full time into gospel music full time?
Sure.
And what are you doing nowadays specifically?
I wrestled with the Lord about ministry for about a year. Because at that point, I was still working for Mr. Greenwood, and I was the band leader, so that was a good salary. I owned a studio. I had a studio in my home, and I had a lot of clients. Still had a lot of those NSAI clients and things, and so that was a good salary. I had a salary that paid me to write 12 songs a year. All I had to do, and it was,
with a publishing company.
yeah, and those salaried writing gigs just ain't out there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're just, and then I was also a session player on other people. I mean, I worked all the time.
Yeah.
And it turned into a nice six-figure income every year. And I told the Lord, you want me to, look how long I've worked to get to this. You want me to give all of that up? Ain't you got anybody else? But I finally, after a year, the Lord just convicted me about it, that I was just using my gifts in the wrong place. I just decided to do it. Now, when I decided to do it, I hadn't talked to my wife about it yet. And we were coming. She's from North Carolina, and we'd been over to visit her family. And it was October. We were driving back through the mountains there. Everything was so pretty. The leaves were changing, and I thought, it's just a nice, serene setting here. It'd be a good time to spring it on her. And I just said, honey, I said, what would you think about me giving Mr. Greenwood my notice and let's go into full-time ministry? And she laughed at me. And she said, what took you so long?
Oh, yeah.
She knew what was going on.
Yeah.
And when I first got into this, I had a record deal fall in my lap.
When you transitioned into music ministry?
Into music ministry, there was a group that I'd been doing some production work for. They were called Reborn Records, and they were out of Chicago. And they had a couple of heavy hitters on the label as far as, I don't know if you remember Rick Derringer, Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo. Well,
yeah.
Rick had gotten saved.
Okay.
And back in the day, he was one of the biggest drunks out there. And now, Rock and Roll, he rewrote Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo. It became Read the Word and Live It Too. And he was on the label. A lady by the name of Bonnie Keene was on the label. She'd come from one of the big female contemporary groups. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, they might make a go of it. And so I took the deal. And I came into the deal with 2 albums that I had just finished. I had just finished my first gospel album, and I just finished a patriotic record for our military stuff. And so I came in a unique position. They didn't have to sink money into me at the get-go for recording. We did an agreement where they leased the masters from me, but I retained ownership of them. And later that became a real saving grace, because it just, the label was based in Chicago, but they had people here running it. And the people here running it saw them coming from a mile away. Mm-hmm. And they just broke them. They were, when I saw my royalty statements and saw what was being charged just for the manufacturing of my product, it was twice what it should have been, 3 times what it should have been. And those people were just, although they worked for the company, they were just pocketing all this money,
Gotcha.
And so I thought, this isn't going to last long. And it did. It began to crumble. And I just simply asked for what's called a peaceful release for my contract and agreed. They were about to go under. And I said, I'll tell you what, if you'll give me a peaceful release, I will purchase all of my product from you. And they agreed. And so I got out lock, stock, and barrel without any legal problems whatsoever. But I told the Lord that, I didn't want to get, it really surprised me the record deal fell in my lap, because that wasn't what I was looking for. I got into this to see lives changed. And if not, I should have just stayed in country music, and doing what I was doing. And so we've been doing this for 18 years now. We still, 18 years later, we operate on a love offering basis. We don't charge fees. We don't, and it's just about it's about several things. If you'd asked me in the beginning of our ministry, what's your ministry, I'd have said, well, to lead the lost to Christ. I could write you a book on what it is now. And we have the opportunity to reach out to our military and to really make a difference in their lives. They sacrifice so much for us, and the Lord's really opened the door for us to not only share the gospel with them, but to do tangible and real things that actually make a difference in the life of the military family. Yeah. And so I really, and I tell pastors this, I want you to see me as a missionary before you see me as a musician. I don't care if you see me as a singer at all. So music is my mode of transportation to get the message out there, but I want you to look for the heart in what we're doing, and I want you to see that it's a missionary's heart. It's not I often talk to young artists, and when they ask me for advice, and I say, well, what do you want to accomplish? Number one, do you want to be famous for Jesus, or do you want to make Jesus famous? Which is it? I said, there's room for both. I don't have a problem with Christian entertainment, there's a need for Christian entertainment. But if you're getting into this for ministry, there's some certain things you need to do, and some certain things you need not to do. You know, and we got in it for ministry, and I believe God's honored that, because again, we're still here 18 years later, and so many that I've seen along the way have had to give it up. And I tell people the Lord has scared us to death a couple times, but He's always provided. He hadn't failed us yet.
Yeah. So what would you say, just wrapping up, would be some advice that you would have for whether it be an artist or a guitar, or a musician? There's so many different things that you've done over the years.
Well, just as we've said several times, whatever market you're in, if it's a music market, whether it be Nashville, L.A., New York, Austin, Texas, wherever, don't live outside of the music world. Get to where it's going on. Immerse yourself in it. If you're especially, of course, I can speak to Nashville better than any other places. Sure. When I say immerse yourself in it, go to every writer's night you can. Go hear some of the live entertainment. Go, if you're a musician and you're wanting to get into, a road band situation, a lot of the road players put together special bands and come and do shows. An example would be all the guys that I used to play with in Mr. Greenwood's band. They're now called Six Wire. I'm the only one that's not there.
Oh, that's them?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
and they play for everybody.
Oh, yeah.
They do at Third and Lindsley in Nashville. Yep. They do a thing every month, and I mean it's kind of neat. We all started together over 30 years ago in 1988, and they're still together. They play a lot of really high profile gigs for the lead singer of Kansas, the former lead singer of Journey. All these, they played with Alice Cooper. I mean, they play for everybody, and a lot of these guys, they do shows. Go and meet them. Go and make friends. Say hello. Just become a part of the fabric of whatever music town you're in. That's the best thing. And we've said it 1,000 times is relationships. But the whole key to surviving in the music business is relationships. Number 2, try to create your own niche. The internet has leveled the playing field so that a lot of folks can have a career that couldn't before.
True.
Because you have an avenue of putting your product out there and putting your, what you do out there. Don't ever think that you've got to get a major record label deal or you can't do the music thing. You most certainly can. If you can find something that nobody else is doing, that's a huge deal. And just like the advice that was given to me, get up every day and do something for your career, whether it be write a song, practice your guitar, book a date, just something. It doesn't have to be a set regiment, but just get up and do something for your musical career every day. Those are the biggest things, that I can think of that I try to, throughout my career, I've tried to live by and do.
Mm-hmm. Do you do your own booking, or do you have someone that does it for you?
I do. I've had very little help with it, and it's a tough deal.
It is hard.
I tell people I'd rather get a root canal than, with what we do, it's always calling pastors, and I think they teach pastors in seminary there's a class on Don't Return Your Calls 101. Exactly. It is
I know it well.
I was told when I got into this that if you work hard for 2 years, you can pick and choose your dates. Mm-hmm. Wrong.
Yeah.
But again, there's a fine line of being pushy and just and
polite persistence.
Yeah, and it's tough to figure that out because it gets frustrating.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the same boat as you are because I do music ministry for a living, and so I know that path very well.
Yeah, I've seen things that have really disappointed me, but in their defense, pastors have several people calling them every week.
Sure, of course they do.
Wanting to come and do this and that in the church, and they have to protect their pulpit, and they don't know you from Adam a lot of times, you'd have to be, what was it? You said persistence,
polite
persistence. Yeah.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for letting me come over and talk with you and
absolutely.
Spend time with you in your studio and just catch up again, and two Paducah boys back together again, and it's been a lot of fun, and just to hear your experience and expertise and all of the fields that you've been a part of is wonderful to hear, and great advice. And so where do people find your music online or the things that you're a part of? Because you also do Operation Tank of Love.
Yeah, we do Operation Tank of Love. That's just an outreach. That's something outside of music.
Right.
That we do for the military family. And we give away free gas and the gospel. Okay. It's real easy to find us all over Facebook. We have a page called Operation Tank Full of Love. We have a page called Eric Corner Ministries. And we have a website, just ericcorner.com, that kind of covers all of it, what we've got, going on. But we do more social media now than anything else. And we also have a recording studio called His Tunes Studios. Okay. that we try to use that to help, especially young ministries that can't afford to go in and just, blow a huge budget on a recording project. We have ways of doing it that still sound really great, and you don't have to break the bank to do it. So that's, His Tune Studios also has a page.
And that's on Facebook as well?
Yeah.
So if people are looking to record and want to come work with you, then they can find you through that as well?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, thank you again. It's great to see you.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
God bless you and everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
All right. Good to see you. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I really hope you enjoyed our conversation with Eric Corner. He's got so much great information, wealth of knowledge to share with all of us. Be sure to check him out online on his website and on Facebook as well. Remember, Edenbrook Music is here to help. If you need consultation over phone, Skype, or FaceTime, let us know how we can help you to start making a living in the music industry.